Okay, let's handle the invoice. And invoice is such a crucial document. Okay, you will not have any shipping document or a presentation without an invoice. Even without bill of lading, without a transport document, without a financial document, you will have a presentation. But without an invoice, you will not have any presentation at all, whether it is service, whether it is goods, whether it is digital goods, whether it is software, technology, anything. Invoice is very mandatory. And you will have almost half of the discrepancy concentrated in invoice. So major areas are transport documents, where you will have most of the discrepancies, and half will be contributed from invoice, because it has a lot of intricacies. Even though the article says only 4 mandatory requirements, there are additional sub articles which has to be followed here. Okay, let's see. So very simply, it has to be made by beneficiary. So the exporter has to use its letterhead. Most of the times there will be a letterhead having the beneficiary's name and the beneficiary's address, country, everything will be there. Okay. So definitely it has to be made out by beneficiary. In the sense, if you have ABC Private Limited as beneficiary in the LC, then it has to be issued and signed by ABC Private Limited. If it is signed by even a group company which is having a similar name, that will be called as a discrepancy. Say, for example, instead of ABC Private Limited, if they sign as ABC Limited, which is the parent company, that will be called as discrepancy. So you should be very careful when we say made out by beneficiary. So who is the beneficiary? It is not the parent company, or it is not the manufacturer, or it is not the supplier. So beneficiary is this person who is given in 59. So for all goodness, when we handle LC, forget about the actual trade. So we need to deal with the people which is mentioned in LC. We need to deal with amount, quantity, unit price, packing, shipment, everything we need to act as per the LC requirement. Even though your actual trade, your difficulties, your practicality, everything will be there, but still you need to follow the LC. So now beneficiary is the person who is given in 59. Again, made out to applicant. Likewise, applicant has to be the person which is given in 50. Not even a single spelling mistake has to be there. Okay, if it is China Fish Mainland Company, it has to be in the same way. You cannot just mention China, like you just make a spelling error here. Instead of A, you just put E. It is still a discrepancy. You may think that, it's a small error, but banks will not leave it. Okay, so now we have seen that invoice made by beneficiary made to applicant. Now we have doubt whether the address and country has to be same. Okay, sometimes a entity will have n number of addresses. So one is a registered address, one is a factory address, one is a shipping address, one is a office address. Okay, so now what UCP and ISBP says that is address need not be same. Okay, for applicant or for beneficiary, address need not be same or need not be shown at all. Okay, so in your invoice, see, for example, here it is made by Shrimp Thai May Company, Thailand. And if you see, this is a discrepancy. So I was saying that there is a small spelling error. Instead of MUAY, they are mentioning MAY. So this is a discrepancy. Okay, coming back to the address. So if you have an invoice which has only the beneficiary's name and without the address, without the country, still it is acceptable under LC. But your customs may say something. Your custom may say, customs people, they may say to mention certain address which you have given in the declaration form. That is totally different. So you try to follow whatever the import custom, export custom says. But for LC, The UCP ISBP provides you a clarification that just the name given in 59 and 50 itself is enough. The address and country need not be given. If it is given, so there are two things, okay? Address can be different. It can mention office address, it can mention registered address, but ensure that it is within the country. Okay, so now there is a company in Beijing called China Fish Mainland Co. So if it shows a Shanghai address, it is fine. So if it shows a Qingdao address, or if it shows a Xinjiang address, whatever, if it shows a different address within China, it is fine. But if you see an address showing Singapore, then it is a problem. So now China Fish Mainland Company, but it shows address of Singapore, then that is a problem. And this is same for both applicant and beneficiary. So ensure that to be putting it's simple and easier for you. You always mention the name and address as shown in field 50 and 59. So whenever you prepare an invoice, ensure that you show the details which is given as in field 50 and 59. But for your additional information, the address can be a different address, but the country mentioned, if it is mentioned, it has to be the same country. Without country, it is fine. UCP ISBP allows.
Yes. If bill to country is China and ship country will be Singapore, then what can we do?
That's fine, because that is very natural, where a billing person is the applicant which is shown in LC, but the applicant is wanting for the end goods has to reach the end point in Singapore. That is fine. That's not a problem. But where you are billing, so that is where the applicant comes. If you have even some other address, say for example here, if you have a delivery to a final delivery to some address, some different name, that is also acceptable. Got it? Because the delivery person, the final delivery.
Yes, I got it.
Yeah, final delivery and applicant may be different. That we are not bothered about it. Whether you show it in invoice or you don't show it, that's not my problem. But when you draw an invoice, you ensure that you draw to the applicant which is shown in the LC field 50. It has to definitely have made by the beneficiary, made to the applicant. And whatever other addresses which is shown in the invoice, which are all additional, so you can ignore it. It can even have different names, different address, different countries, not a problem. Provided you have an applicant which has the details as per field 50.
The invoice number, it looks too complex. Can we just rename it by ourselves? Or
yeah,
I didn't understand STM02.
Of course, it is actually my own sample invoice which I prepared. And for you, how invoice is generated is most of the times companies will have a software where the invoice will be auto-generated. Or
it's for generating.
Yeah. So for small companies, they will just manually number it. So they will have that INV001. So you can have your own invoice. It's not a big task.
Okay, it won't be affect the custom.
Yeah. And what I was trying to say is, see, for example, we have a beneficiary address, which is okay, which is as per field 50, 59 in LC. And we have applicant here. So bill to is okay. Or if it shows applicant, this is also okay. If it shows importer, this is also okay. You can accept it. Okay. So there ends the requirement of LC. So additionally, now we have a third address. So this can be anything. Do not worry. And fourth address, you have deliver to ABC Limited. So again, it has address. It is having India. Do not worry about this. Okay. This is additional to applicant's address. So our minimum requirement is already satisfied here. So the additional one given in ship to and deliver to are all not matter to us. Okay, so currency and amount. So it has to be the LC currency and it has to be the amount within the LC. If you see amount more than your LC, then that is a discrepancy. So this is same as draft bill of exchange. So when you draw an invoice, definitely it has to have the LC currency. Without currency, it will be called as a discrepancy. Then come to amount. So your invoice has to be 500,000 or less than that if your LC allows partial shipment. If partial shipment is not allowed, then you cannot draw an invoice less than 500,000. Okay, so in that case, your invoice has to definitely have USD, which is here already in the sample, and which has to have the full amount 500,000. That is also there. So showing in amount in words, or if it has some other details, then those things are all additional. Our minimum requirement is LC currency and amount which is equal or lesser than the full LC value. Okay, then the fourth item is goods description. This is the very, very most important thing, and this is where most of the discrepancy will be happening. Okay, so goods description, where do we get that from? Do we get that from purchase order, or do we get that from Proforma invoice or a contract? Okay, so where do we get that invoice goods from? So this is where we are getting from field 45A. So our LC field 45A, which is for description of goods. So when you prepare an invoice, it has to have all the details which is in 45A. It need not be a mirror image. So you need not draw this as a 45A, but ensure that all the information given in 45A are there in your invoice. So the order can be different. So you can start with 90 metric ton and you can mention raw catch shrimps in the middle of the invoice. And then this, as per applicant's PO number, you can mention that in the bottom. That is not the matter. But whatever data given in 45A, each and every single word, including this year of the Incoterms, that has to be there in the invoice. So that is what they say. Goods description has to correspond to 45A. Corresponding means all the information has to be there, but it need not be a mirror image. So let us see. Here, in fact, it is already a mirror image, so no need to worry. But ensure that raw catch shrimp, 90 metric ton, all the things given in 45A are given. So if you just mention Incoterms without this, banks will still raise that as a discrepancy. They will say that, goods description not as per LC or LC field 45A. Okay. So this stringent goods description rule is only for invoice. So you need not go and mention the full 45A details in other documents. You need not mention that in packing list. You need not mention that in your bill of lading or in your insurance document. So in those documents, the representation can be in general. So if you just mention raw catch shrimps, that is enough for all other documents. But only in invoice, all the 45A things has to be there. Okay, so ensure that you are very clear in this. Whatever there in 45A has to be definitely there in invoice. But for all other documents, it can be in general. So now we have few other things which needs to be noted. That is nothing but Proforma invoice. So we can also have a purchase order. So both are similar. One comes from seller, one comes from buyer. But under LC, a Proforma invoice or purchase order or a sales contract invoice, that is not allowed. Whatever the case may be, whether it is signed, whether it is agreed, accepted by both buyer and seller, whatever the case may be, do not present a Proforma invoice. So your invoice has to be titled as a commercial invoice, which is okay, or simply titled invoice. That is also okay, or it is titled as tax invoice. That's also okay. Customs invoice, okay. Without even title, okay. But ensure that it is not titled as Proforma invoice. It is not titled as purchase order. Okay. So these are all the purchase order and Proforma invoice. Why it is not allowed is they are not yet agreed. So they are not yet considered as a contract. So before even finalizing a contract, these Proforma invoice and purchase order will exist. Once they agree, so this will be going off, and then final invoice or commercial invoice has to actual goods shipped. So when you show an invoice, so your overall goods description is 90 metric ton, but this time you are shipping lesser amount. So you are shipping only for 20 metric ton. So ensure that you show that 20 metric ton. So do not just leave as a full value. So if you just mention 90 metric ton and if you draw 100,000 here, so it is a discrepancy. So you can show a full value, full goods quantity, but ensure that you show the exact amount which you are shipping. To better understand, your LC has 5 cars and 5 bikes. Okay. So to satisfy the 45A condition, you are mentioning here like 5 cars, 5 bikes. But in fact, you are shipping only cars this time. Okay. So here you mention 5 cars, 5 bikes. That is fine. But somewhere here you mentioned that this time only 5 cars going. So here you can mention 5 cars and the corresponding amount. So do not just leave only the general goods when you are shipping partial value. Okay, then your invoice can show advance or discount amount. Sometimes the overall trade value will be 10 million, but only for 5 million you are involving LC. So remaining 5 million was already paid by the importer as advance payment. So 5 million through advance payment and 5 million through LC. So your invoice may show that total value 10 million, wherein below you can have a sub point or subline showing that 50%, which is 5 million already paid by advance. And below you can mention the currently claiming amount. So you need not worry that, okay, my invoice should not show the 10 million because LC value is only 5 million. Likewise, discounts also can be given, which is not a problem. So your original invoice value may show amount higher than the LC amount. Okay, so it may show if your LC is 10 million, but your invoice may show 11 million. Or 11 million is too high, maybe you can just consider some $20,000 or $10,000. So your invoice may show 10 million, $10,000, and below that you will show discount 10%, which is for 10,000. Then the final amount will come to the LC value. So like that, you can show advance and discount, not a problem. But what you cannot show is samples. Okay, you should not show sample or free of charge goods, even though it is a very common practice. People, a buyer, he may want to see the sample, how it works. So definitely exporter has to ship it on a free of charge goods. And maybe when he is shipping the final goods, he may charge for that, for 1 unit or 2 units. But under LC, you should not do that. If you want to do it, then mention that in your LC. So in 47A or in 45A, you as an exporter, tell the importer to mention that in LC application. So when issuing bank issues the LC, it will have that condition stating that sample goods are allowed or sample 1 unit free of charge allowed. So everything has to be allowed under LC. But normally LC, UCP or banks, they will raise it as a discrepancy if you show free of charge goods or sample goods. Okay, guys.
I think I feel like I missed some information if you explain it. But I have a question. What if you want to send spare parts, like as a sample, what we can use for free? No
What
change.
you want to send? You want to send sample, right?
Yeah, like spare parts. Sometimes the customers they need it.
Okay, so if you want to send a sample, you send it, but do not bring it under LC. Don't show that in your invoice. You maintain a separate invoice.
Okay, not Proforma invoice.
No, don't present it through the banking channel, through the LC. LC
Okay.
mechanism will not allow samples. If you want to allow, then you draft the LC in that way. Let your LC itself first allow the samples.
Okay.
So LC is in fact issued by the bank, right? But the issuance request first comes from importer. So importer and exporter, they agree and they come out with the LC requirements, LC conditions. So applicant will be giving the LC conditions through the LC application. So in your LC application, as an exporter, you tell the importer, put a 47A condition for your bank. So let the bank allow samples under LC. Okay, so if you forget or if your LC does not allow samples, send it away or apart from the LC cycle. So do not merge or include your samples and free under the LC mechanism. Don't show that to the bank.
Shipping handling, it's like you showed as a zero. Do we have to just write a number or?
No, you need not. So in fact, whatever we discuss here are the mandatory things. So rest of the things, it is up to you to fill. Say for example, this shows the tenor of the LC. It shows site. It need not even show that. And for your information, invoice need not dated. Invoice need not have a issue date. Invoice need not be signed. So invoice need not be signed at all. Some countries prefer signature. They may impose some law, but under UCP and ISBP, date, signature are not mandatory. Okay, the mandatory things a bank has to pass on without raising the discrepancy is made out by beneficiary to applicant, currency and amount, and the goods description corresponding as per 45A. Rest of the things are all additional matters which you may have to satisfy as per the importing country's requirement or as per your exporting country's requirement, because your country may say your invoice has to have quantity details, it has to have packing details, it has to be signed by beneficiary. So something like that your country may impose. So that is more than or additional to this requirement which we are discussing now.
Okay.
Now we come to a very important thing. This might be slightly confusing, but do not worry. So goods description has to show a quantity. So if you have a general quantity, it's fine. You can simply show whatever given in 45A. If it has a specific quantity, say for example, 5 cars, 5 bikes, I told you that you just mention it generally and also specifically include whatever is going for that shipment. Now, when you have a bulk goods, say for example, 1000 metric tons of coal, how can you measure it? Do you think that you can properly weigh it? 1000 metric tons of core, how can you measure it? Exactly. You cannot do that. So there is a usage of tolerance, more or less. Okay. So tolerance is nothing but more or less to enable something, due to some trade difficulties or due to some normal trade practice, tolerance has to be applied. So tolerance will be applied to 3 things. So one is for unit price. So due some quantity, some goods may be, vulnerable due to some market conditions. Say for example, currency itself. Currency is a commodity, or take gold. take diamond. They are all highly volatile. So you cannot fix a price. So you may have to allow a tolerance for unit price. Then for quantity. So the example which I was saying, coal. So coal is a bulk goods. You cannot measure it properly. So you have to allow a tolerance for measuring the quantity. You cannot exactly weigh 1000 metric ton. So you may have to apply plus or minus 10% or plus or minus 5%. So whatever you specify in LC, you can mention. Even you can mention higher amount. You can mention plus or minus 15%. Okay. So you will calculate a 10% more, 10% less, and between that value, you can shift the quantity. Okay, so unit price quantity we apply. Finally, due to the change in quantity, due to the change in unit price, obviously your total LC amount is going to change. Say for example, 10 into 1000. 10 is the unit price, 1000 is the goods value, goods quantity. So 10 into 1000, 10,000. 10,000 is your LC value. If you are going to reduce your unit price to 9, so 9 into 1000, which will be 9,000. So obviously you need to apply a tolerance for your LC, total LC amount also. Okay, so this is what an example of tolerance, why a tolerance exists for LC. So now they are giving some specific 3 rules. Let us see what that is. So first is your LC will allow a specific tolerance. So they will say plus or minus 5% for a total amount, plus or minus 10% for unit price, or plus 5% for LC amount alone, or minus 5% for unit price alone, whatever. So specifically, LC mentions, allows some tolerance for the respective thing. So we have seen 3 things: unit price, quantity, LC amount. So LC may allow tolerance for all the 3 things together, or even for 1 or for 2. So whatever it applies. So now LC has a specific tolerance. Second, there is a general tolerance. So your LC is not mentioning any tolerance at all. As we have started with an example, 1000 metric tons of coals. So in fact, this tolerance is, given in UCP. If I'm right, it is Article 30. So 30 talks about the tolerance. So these 3 things are all sub-articles in that. So first is allowing a specific tolerance given in LC. So the second sub-article states that whenever you deal with a bulk goods, which is not measurable, which is not countable, you can automatically apply plus or minus 5% to the quantity, to the quantity alone. So here you need to be very careful, because this is to address the logical problem you are going to face when you handle a bulk goods. Say for example, 1000 liters of crude oil, you cannot measure it. There are natural, affect, the nature is going to change the condition. So for cotton, 1000 metric tons of cotton, it is going to absorb some moisture and the weight is going to go high. So you might have weighed 1000 metric ton, but at the destination point, it will be 10 or 20 metric tons higher due to the moisture absorbance. So for bulk goods, they means UCP and ISBP allows automatic plus or minus 5% for quantity alone. So this is not applicable for, this is not applicable for individual items. So if you are able to count it, then why do you find it difficult to do that, right? So wherever you are not able to measure, that is where you are applying the plus or minus 5 automatic tolerance. When there is a unit price, already you are unifying it. So when you have a unit price, which means that it is an individual quantity. So do not apply that. Now we have the third thing. This is, This is slightly, difficult to understand. People find it difficult. But I'll just put it in simple, okay? Whenever you ship the goods, which is called an LC, for a full amount, say for example, 90 metric ton is called for in the LC, and you are shipping full 90 metric ton. Okay, there is no unit price, or if there is any unit price, you are not reducing. So when you have shipped the full goods without reducing unit price, finally you can apply a minus 5% in the overall LC amount. Okay, so this is in fact to provide a provision to address the freight charges. The fluctuations in freight charges will be, taking your overall LC amount for high or less. See, sometimes you calculate the overall goods value like freight charges for 5,000, but due to surge in the freight charges, it will go down, okay, maybe to 4,000. So this can be accommodated. So this is the example. So likewise, you ship the goods fully and you can apply some reduction up to minus 5% in your overall goods value. Okay, so now you need not worry much about that. So this is for your information. So ensure that you get the first para, the beneficiary applicant name and address, and the currency and amount, and the corresponding nature of goods description. Okay, so you can utilize the tolerance which is already allowed. Okay, sometimes if it allows plus or minus 5% for your amount, then you can utilize that, drawing more amount than the LC. But ensure that it does not exceed the overall LC amount. So even beyond a tolerance, if you draw amount, then that will be called as LC overdrawn discrepancy. We will take an example of iron ore. Okay, iron ore, you know that there are a lot of impurities, correct? And when you ship it, right, the external environment, iron is subject to oxidation. So when it oxidizes, it attracts rust. Okay, so when rust is there could be moisture also, or in fact it is other ways. Whenever there is moisture formed, the oxidation happens and rust forms. This is going to increase your weight. So now you will not be able to exactly weigh. So your LC allows 100 metric tons. The quantity under LC is 100 metric tons of iron ore. But when you weigh it, it is going to be 105 metric tons or 95 metric tons, because you can't weigh it properly. And even though if you may weigh 100 metric tons and send it to the destination point, when they verify, it is going to be less or high due to the environmental change, or there will be a lot of pilferage. So when you take the iron ore, a lot of things are going to go in the ground, correct? And there will be loss when you transport. So handling a bulk goods, you cannot properly measure it. You cannot exactly measure. So to address this problem, the difficulty, UCP and ISBP says that you can allow plus or minus 5% in the 100 metric ton. So for example, let me take a small thing with a value. Okay. So here we'll take 100 metric tons of iron ore. So what will be the 5% for this? This is going to be, okay, now 100 metric ton iron ore, LC and UCP and ISBP is going to allow plus or minus 5% tolerance in quantity. So now you can ship the quantity between 95 metric ton to 105 metric ton. Am I right? I'll just put it in a different way where it is not allowed. If it is 100 mobile phones, okay, if you ship 99, where partial shipment is not allowed. So your partial shipment is not allowed in both the cases. So in the first case, so this is the first case, this second case will go there. So now first case, 100 mobiles is the LC requirement. When you ship 99, this will be called as discrepancy. When you ship 101, this is again a discrepancy because they are exactly asking you 100, which you can easily count it and ship it. So when you ship even one less or more, it is going to be called as discrepancy. But for 100 metric tons of iron ore, you will not be able to count it. You will not be able to measure it properly. So they are allowing plus or minus 5% for quantity alone. So if you ship a value of quantity between 95 to 105, banks are not going to call that as a discrepancy. So now we have a publication. This is also issued by ICC. This is called Incoterms, and the current version is 2020. Exporter and importer. This is very, very crucial because this is what going to tell you until which point you are going to take the risk and responsibility. So between importer and exporter, we know that in international trade, a goods going to start from exporter's factory and going to end in importer's warehouse. In between, there are a lot of activities and it involves charges, it involves fees, and in between, if something happens, who is going to take the ownership? If goods are lost, if goods are burned, if goods are stolen, who is the responsibility? Okay, this is the biggest problem in international trade. Who is going to hold whose collar? So in domestic trade, you are governed under the same country law. When you buy something, you know that it will be the buyer's responsibility to deliver it, or it will be the seller's responsibility to deliver it. But in different laws of different countries, now people have a confusion. Who is going to cover my insurance? Who is going to take the responsibility? Who is going to deliver until the seaport? Or whether he is going to pay for the export duty? Or whether seller will come and deliver it in my country, paying the import duty, right? So these are all very, very big confusions. You will agree. In sales contract, you will agree. But you cannot put it a 1-pager or 2-pager explaining this thing. See, you pack the goods, you put it in the truck, you bring it to the so-and-so point, you pay for that, you take the insurance. And then for loading, you have to pay. Unloading, I will pay. Then from there, I will arrange for the truck. Then after the truck reaches my warehouse, I will arrange for unloading. So you cannot keep a 1-pager or 2-pager explaining these activities. Instead, they have Incoterms wherein they have already explained or determined the risk and responsibility for a buyer and seller are already explained. This can be used for domestic or even for international trade also. Okay. So they give an acronym. It's a 3 alphabetical acronym. So it will be like this. X. This is EXW. This is X works. And FCA, free carrier. Then we have FAS, free alongside ship. Then we have FOB, free on board. Then we have CFR. Say this is cost and freight. Then CIF, cost, insurance and freight. Then CPT, carriage paid to. Then we have CIP, carriage and insurance paid to. Then we have DAP, delivered at place. Then delivered at place unloaded. Then delivered duty paid. Okay, when you search Google, you will get a lot of charts. A lot of explanations will be there. So when a buyer and seller, they agree to use this word X works, which means that the seller will be having least responsibility and least cost. So X works says that seller has to just manufacture the goods, pack it and keep it ready. The buyer will come and take, it will pay export duty, import duty, the on carriage travel cost, the pre-carriage travel cost, the main carriage, loading, unloading, everything will be borne by the buyer. So this is how it will start and move on. So when it moves from Ex Works to DDP, the seller's responsibility and cost will keep increasing and the buyer's cost and responsibility will be reducing. So Ex Works will be the least risk for seller and DDP will be the highest risk and highest cost. So DDP is nothing but delivered duty paid. So seller has to pay for import duty also and whatever in between, like whatever I told, packing, loading, unloading, export customs clearance, import customs clearance, pre-carriage, main carriage, on carriage, everything has to be paid by seller. And the truck will go and stand before the importer's warehouse. Then importer will arrange for unloading the goods. That is what importer will do in DDP. Now I will leave it to you guys to go and see, read the other terms, because if we cover that, it will take another 1 or 1.5 hours. But it will be simple. I have given you how you need to approach. Okay, it will be easy for you to understand, I believe. But few things as a document preparer, when you prepare a document, few things you need to take care. And that is the reason I included here. Okay. So now, when you use certain Incoterm, it will convey that a freight, whether freight is paid or not. Here, freight means main freight. So there are 3 possible freights which will be happening in a international trade. So first is the pre-carriage. So from exporter's warehouse till that port of loading, you need to carry your goods, right? Not all export factory will be in port of loading itself. Just manufacture the goods and load it in the ship. Like we see in Titanic film, where, people load goods in the ramp of the ship. So most of the times, in olden days, the factory will be there near the, the port area. But nowadays, each and every landlocked area, they prepare some goods, they have to transport it to the loading place. And after the pre-carriage, the main carriage happens from port of loading to port of discharge. The ship or the vessel moves after unloading in the discharge place. Again, it has to travel interior of the buyer's country and deliver it to the importer's warehouse. So again, on carriage is used. So there are 3 freights. It has to be paid. The freight charges for all these 3 modes has to be paid. But now, whatever you are seeing in this slide is freight, which is for main freight. The port of loading to port of discharge is what they are saying. Okay, now, when you use the Incoterms, these 4 Incoterms, Ex Works, FCA, FS, FOB, FAS, this means that the freight is not paid. Okay, freight is not paid by the seller. It will be the responsibility of the buyer. So when you use our Incoterm in FOB, and this Incoterm will be given along with the 45A. So here you can see CFR, any China port. So the Incoterm will be followed by the place. So if it says CFR any China port, so until a China port, the responsibility of the seller will be there. Once it loads the goods onto the vessel and pays for the main freight, the job of the seller will end. Beyond that, importer's job will start. Okay, to convey this, they will mention CFR any China port. Now, our job is, since it is CFR, it conveys that the freight is already paid. So now CFR is used, which means that freight is already paid. When they use E terms and F terms, freight is not paid. So it will be the responsibility of the importer. So freight has to be shown as collect. The big problem which people will do is the Incoterms shown in 45A will be FOB, but in bill of lading they will show that as freight prepaid. So this kind of inconsistency you should be careful. So you should ensure when you use these E terms and F terms, ensure that all your shipping documents shows freight as collect. When you use C terms and D terms, so we have 4 C terms, 3 D terms. Ensure that all your shipping documents which shows freight as freight prepaid. Okay, whatever I'm saying doesn't mean that all documents has to show. If it is showing, it has to be freight prepaid. So understand and get it clearly. Okay. So this is not a requirement that all documents has to show, but whenever it shows, it has to match.
I have a
Yeah,
question.
Yeah, please.
What is the difference between export and FOB?
Okay. So now I've told you that goods originate, it is packed, it is loaded into the truck moves to the port of loading, but before that there is a container freight station or inland container flow. So now the truck goes to the port of loading and the goods are delivered into the vessel moves to the discharge and unloaded from the vessel in the port area. Then a truck again comes, takes the goods, deliver that to the import. So these are all the major activities, and in between there will be export customs duty and import customs duty. So export customs duty will be next to the export packing before the truck takes. Okay, now I've introduced a term called container freight station and inland container depot. So in olden days, the vessel directly comes to the quay region and people load the goods, but nowadays it is not so. Not all goods, not all people will go directly near the ship and load the goods. Now it is congested. Population is high, competition is high. The operators are more. So now the economics of scale for all these operations are very high. So you cannot go and do all these things in the port area because port area is very small area. You cannot go and stand and do all these things. Because of this, we have container freight station, wherein there will be a specialized people. Maybe your customs government people also will be there. So customs will be sitting there, and the freight forwarders, the logistic people, they are also will be sitting there, where they segregate the goods, they pack, they do the containerization, they do the clearance. Okay, everything will be done outside the port of loading. And once it is done, the container will be sealed there and directly it will be moving to the port area where that, you would have seen that big machines where it will take the container and load it, place it into the vessel. Now we have this CFS and ICD operating, which is doing, right? Okay, now we come to the question. What is the difference between X-Works and FOB? So what is X-Works? The exporter packs the goods and keep it ready, and it will be showing X-Works, the beneficiary's warehouse. So that the place which is following the Incoterm will be beneficiary's warehouse. In other words, it has to be a place, say for example, Shanghai, China. So Shanghai is the warehouse where the exporter's warehouse is there. So X-Works, Shanghai warehouse. Or maybe it will say ABC, Shanghai warehouse. ABC is the company name. Okay, so the buyer or the importer will understand that it has to send a truck to pick that. Now, if you use FOB, which is free on board, as an exporter, you need to carry the goods in your truck, go to the port area or go to the container freight station, do all the formalities, and you have to ensure that The container is placed inside the vessel. So your job doesn't stop where you are just packing and keeping it in your warehouse and the buyer is going to send. So that is X works. In FOB, you need to take your goods, complete the formalities, ensure that your goods are placed inside the vessel. So that is called free on board.
Right.
And if you just place it inside the port, I mean, just on the port area, not into the vessel, that is called FAS, free alongside ship. Okay.
Okay, got it.
So now when you move to X works, we know what X works is. What is FCA? You deliver the goods in a certain place. You are not delivering it in your warehouse. You are not just stopping there in your warehouse. You are taking the goods and moving towards a nearby place where importer calls for. So it will be a container freight station. So you deliver that in the container freight station. That is called FCA. Now, when you deliver that near the ship, that is called FAS. When you deliver that inside the vessel itself, if you see, it's a step-by-step adding. So from X works to FCA, there will be a step added. So from FAS, the step added is onboarding the goods into the vessel. So that is FOB. So now from FOB to CFR, you need to pay for the main freight. That is called CFR. Okay. And when you add insurance to CFR, it will be CIF. Okay. And when you add the clearance near in the buyer's country, it is CPT. And when you pay for insurance, it is CIP. And when you move from container freight station in the importer's country to a nearby place, it is called DAP. And if you unload it, it is DPU. And if you pay for the import duty and deliver it near the importer's warehouse, it is called DDP. So that is how the one by one, the activity will be adding on, and the risk and responsibility will be moving, increasing for the seller from Xbox to DDP. Got it, guys?
Yes. CFR and CNF is same.
Same. Yeah, both are same. Packing list, most of the times, it is not going to be so much difference when you compare invoice and packing list. So packing list, in fact, a minimum requirement in a packing list is it has to show a packing condition. It need not be signed. It need not be dated. It doesn't matter who prepare. But for invoice, we know that it has to be prepared by the beneficiary. Okay. And bill of exchange, we know that it has to be prepared or signed by the beneficiary. But for packing list, it can be prepared by anybody. It can be signed or not signed. It can be dated or not dated. It can be even blank, provided it has some packing condition. So the minimum requirement is, what is the packing? So what packing condition means? Saying that the goods are going in carton boxes. The goods are going in pallets. The goods are going in corrugated boxes. The goods are going in container or reefer container or tubes or barrels. So a packing list has to mention the purpose of the requirement. So why do you require a packing list? To ensure how it is packed. So the manner of the packing, where you are packing the goods. So for in your company, if you are packing all your goods in a wooden carton box, then your packing list may show 2 wooden boxes or 2 wooden crates.